Was Jesus a historical figure? Did he really exist?
Yes.
Yes. It's a very firm yes. Okay. And anybody remember what year he died? 2?
2000.
Remember, our calendar is based on what year he lived, or was born, rather.
0.
He died in the year 0, so he was 0 years old when he died.
No, he 36.
Close. Huh?
33.
33. Thank you. He's 33 years old when he died. So, okay. Anybody remember who killed him?
Soldiers.
That's true. That's true. Anybody else? Anybody in particular?
The head of the soldiers.
Who was named Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate. He was a real guy, etc. All right. Anybody remember the 3L argument?
Lunatic, Lord, and liar.
Lunatic, Lord. So what is the 3L argument, Izzy?
I don't know.
Does anybody, can anybody answer that? 3L argument, what is it?
What do we say?
What's that?
Do we say like what it is?
Yeah, fire away.
Loco, liar.
Yeah, we are. We say which ones they are, yeah, but that proves what are the options, right? Jesus, all right, why did Jesus die? Why was he killed? What did they, why did they say, hey, buddy, you gotta die? Because he claimed to be,
God in the flesh.
he claimed to be God in the flesh. That's a big thing. And so there are only 3 options with that. So he's either a liar, he was a lunatic, or he's Lord. He is who he says he was. So, at any rate, so last week we were discussing who Jesus is, and the week before we were talking about just God in general and how the world can come to exist and why it's unreasonable to think there's no God. So what I want to do tonight is to begin to explain to you the big story, because we all seem to kind of gravitate towards stories. Movies are stories, books are stories, and so we really love a story. We seem to be wired for that. And so what's the story of our salvation? What's the story of our fall, and then preparation for redemption, and then for Jesus to come? And so this is why I have this chart here to give us a visual of the overarching view of our salvation, beginning from Adam and Eve, Noah, Abraham, Moses, then we'll go to King David, and then the prophets, etc. Because you probably hear about, you go to Mass and you hear a reading from the prophet so-and-so. Okay, well, who is that? What's the big story involved here? So, this is what I want us to do today. Well, just go ahead and join us. So today we're getting the overall story of salvation history. This is only the first half. I got the second half right here. And so we're just going to kind of go through it. I really don't like how low it is. It's bothering me. But it is what it is. We'll see what we can do. Actually, Sophie, could you do me a big favor? To come up here. I know. I can't see myself bending down the whole time. All right, I want you to hold this thing up. All right. So this is what we're going to walk through today. This is a nice visual chart of our salvation history, which is very, very helpful. And so the first thing you're going to notice are the different colors, okay? These are different periods of history, different periods of our salvation, or the salvation history, like what's going on. So, so it breaks it up very nicely. Up here it tells you, so we have a bunch of books in the Bible, Okay, we have 73 books in the Bible. Not all of them tell a story. Some are prophets, yelling at kings or whatever. But certain books give us a big story. Okay. You got to pull it your way. We're going to make it nice and taut. Yeah. So certain books give us the big overarching story. And that's what we're going to get here. So Genesis 1 through 11, Genesis 12 through 50, Exodus, etc. Now, you'll notice here, these are other books in the Bible. So the book of Job. You ever hear the book of Job? When was that written? It's going to be during this time period right here. Or later, Leviticus, it's going to be during this time period. Or Deuteronomy, here. So that's what that's for. Now, this little section is very helpful. It shows how God makes a series of what are called covenants. All right, can you hold the bottom as well, Steve? Thank you. So, anybody know what a covenant is? Your parents are probably in one. Marriage, exactly. So, covenant is. Sorry, I'm going to keep coughing tonight. A covenant is. It's something that when you go to the store, you give money and you get something for it, right? A covenant is not that. A covenant is not an exchange of money for somebody to give me something. Rather, a covenant is an exchange of persons. So, sort of like a covenant of friendship. I will be your friend, you be my friend. Or your parents gave themselves to each other on their wedding. Like, I will no longer be mine. I'm going to be yours and you are going to be mine. So that complete exchange, that's what a covenant is. And we human beings are really wired for covenants. We don't want to be used. We want to be appreciated and loved and be in that type of relationship. And so God does that throughout history and with certain people at certain times and etc. All right. So we'll be going through this, the different covenants that God makes. All right. This gives us some of the main story, or the main events of the big story. So for instance, all right, Adam and Eve, they're created. Then they fall. And then they have curses. They're going to die, for instance. Emily, you see how good you are? You are just fantastic. Thank you. Got Vanna White and Vanna White 1.2.0. Okay. So then we have the flood. Everybody know about the flood? Story, something about the flood? What do you got?
Noah's Ark.
So Noah's Ark. All right, we'll be getting to that. All right. So, but these hit the main main events of salvation history. Okay. But then you're going to see this little red line is going to go through everything, all through this timeline. And that red line is going to get us from Adam all the way eventually to Jesus, okay? And this whole thing is going to show what Jesus is going to do. So this is setting the stage for what Jesus is going to accomplish for us, okay? So we have other bits of good information throughout. And then we have, all right, who's the major power? Who's a very powerful nation at that time? So sometimes it's going to be the Egyptians. They're going to be the biggest kid on the block, beating up everybody and taking their lunch money. And so that goes for quite a while. And then eventually you'll get to like the Assyrians, the Babylonians, or modern-day Iraqis, the Greeks, and the Romans. Okay? So you're always going to get a different bully in the neighborhood, as it were. And then down here you have the actual time, like when these things actually occurred. So, for instance, in the 1400s BC, that's when the Jews left Egypt, okay, after several hundred years of being in Egypt. And then down here you have other just historical events. So, for instance, the Greek language, it's first written down around this time period, 1450 BC. Or, where are the pyramids? Great Pyramids. All right, about 2700 BC, Stonehenge, etc. So you get different events. All right. So now we're going to go through what took place. All right. So Adam and Eve. Who knows anything about Adam and Eve? Don.
That Eve ate the apple. That the devil tricked her into eating.
Okay. So you had a garden. You had one man, one woman, Adam, Eve, then a serpent, okay, who is a personification of the devil. He's also in there, and he does trick Eve into. So they're in the garden, and how many important trees are in the garden? Name a couple of trees that are in the garden. The tree of.
Good and evil.
The tree of close. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So being able to know right from wrong. And what? The tree of life. So these are two very important trees. So, all right, put it down for a second, rest your arms. I'm just going to write down some important things for us probably to pick up on later. What does that mean?
Cross, Jane.
Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
All right, everybody. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
Jesus,
All right. The cross is for Jesus, Mary, Joseph. Okay? There. So we have the tree of life. So in the garden, we have the tree of life. Guess what? That's going to come back for us. All right. So they had one rule: don't eat of the tree in the middle of the garden. And what the serpent tricked Eve into doing? Exactly that. All right. So that is what's called the fall. That is the reason why you have death in the world. What's up, Don?
What would have happened if Eve never ate the apple?
That is a very good question. If they had never have sinned, the big thing is disobeying God. Then they would never have died. They would never have had pain. They would never have fought with each other. They would never have gotten old. They would always be in complete self-control. You know, sometimes we get overly angry or we eat too much. We do things that we know are wrong. They didn't have that problem before. So those are some of the things. So now we can just speculate what would have happened. God knew what would happen, and He allowed it to happen anyways. But this is why we don't have any peace. This is why there's war in the world. This is why men and women fight. This is why, even within ourselves, we do what we don't want to do. Okay? Like, you ever eat too much pizza? Don't answer that. I bet you do, though. So we do stuff that we know is wrong, whatever. Okay? And eventually we suffer and we die. None of that was supposed to be part of the bargain. Like, who wants to die? Nobody wants to die. Maybe they feel like it's the only option. But it's not natural for us to die because we're not designed for that. We were created to live forever with God. The fall occurs. And so we have to deal with this reality. So it may not be our fault, but it is our problem. All right. Now, are Adam and Eve, are they just a myth? The answer is no. So, you guys, have you ever learned anything about genetics? DNA? Sorbel, have you ever heard about DNA? Yeah, just a little bit. It's like our little program. Like, we're going to have blonde hair or black hair or whatever, how tall we're going to be, etc. And so scientists who study genetics, they've come to the conclusion, and look, scientists aren't always right. A lot of times they end up getting corrected many years later. But anyway, right now, science lines up with the Bible. Genetics scientists, they've come to the conclusion that there is a single male first parent and a single female first parent. So in your chromosome, that's where your dad's line of DNA is stored. And what's called your mitochondrion, that's another part of your cells. That's where your mom's DNA, that whole line is stored. And so they've come to the conclusion there's a single male parent, single female parent. They call it chromosomal Adam and mitochondrial Eve. This is the name. So scientists today are convinced we've had a single pair of first parents. So at any rate, so that's Adam and Eve. That's the fall. The curses, okay? But also there's a promise. Immediately at the beginning of Genesis, God promises, hey, y'all done messed up, but, how does he put it? When God is giving the curses out to Adam, Eve, and the serpent, he says to the serpent, I will put hatred between you and the woman, between your seed, your offspring rather, and her offspring. You will strike at his head, and it depends on the translation. Sometimes it's he, sometimes it is she, will crush your head. So at the Genesis chapter 3, at the very beginning of Scripture, we have the promise that the serpent's head is going to be crushed. Okay? There's going to be a future man and a future woman. So this is another thing for us to keep in mind. So in the garden, we have the tree of life. You also have Adam and Eve. But also the promise, there's going to be a future man and woman that will crush the head of the serpent. So a future man and woman that will be part of redemption, of setting everything right, okay? We're just setting the stage here, kiddos. You're going to notice that a lot of what Jesus does is going to involve fulfilling these things or answering these questions or whatever. All right, what else we got? Ladies. All right. So, even though we've had creation in the fall, God creates a covenant with Adam and Eve. Okay, so he's creating a covenant with a couple, a man and a woman. You're going to notice that God's going to continue making covenants. He's going to give himself to his people, Meme. But it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger each time. Okay. So, after they fall, they are kicked out of what?
The garden.
The garden, okay? And then there are two angels with flaming swords placed at the head of the garden to prevent them from coming in. So the whole idea, all right, we get kicked out of paradise. Our goal is to return to paradise. That's what all this is about. We'll come back to that. So our goal is to return to paradise. So they continue to live, and they have kids, Cain and Abel. Anybody remember the story of Cain and Abel?
Didn't one kill one of the kids because they're jealous?
Not one of the kids, but one of the brothers.
One of the brothers, yeah.
All right, so who killed whom? Cain killed Abel. Why? Because he was able. No? Come on, that's funny. Because he was able to do it. Cain killed Abel because he... Never mind, Izzy. What?
Because he thought he was doing like most of the work, and he was just like, and the other brother was just taking care of the lambs, and I think they like give food to God.
Okay, yes, you're very, very close. All right, so Cain is basically a gardener. And, all right, put it down for a second. Rest your little arms. I'm going to pay you handsomely for this. So the idea is offering sacrifice. So you're giving gifts to God. You're offering a sacrifice to God. So Cain is a gardener, and he's offering his first fruits to God. Okay, that's nice. Abel was the head of sheep. And so he sacrificed one of them to God. And for whatever reason, we don't even know for sure why, Dom, God liked Abel's sacrifice better than Cain's. and Cain gets really jealous. And what does jealousy lead to?
Murder.
In this case, murder. And so Cain murdered his brother. Okay? So, you see, this is an effect of the fall, right? That wouldn't have happened beforehand. But here we have. So, anyway, so worshiping God is a very important thing right off the bat, and doing it correctly. So that's Cain and Abel. All right, ladies. And then we fast forward throughout history, and then we get to Noah and the flood. All right, you can put it down now. Now, is there any evidence for a flood? A big flood?
The ocean.
Thousands of years ago? Well, yeah, but the ocean, even getting higher or whatever. Actually, there is. There are a lot of ancient civilizations that write about a huge flood taking place. And you have like all sorts of, for instance, like wildlife from the ocean, deep in the ocean, being found in the middle of land masses. I'm trying to remember where exactly. But as if they were washed up, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles or whatever. So you can get into all that evidence. Point is, I'm going to keep going back to science and evidence, because if this stuff is true, then it's true. And it will hold up to any microscope or telescope or anything. Okay? I'm not doing this because I believe in fairy tales. That's my point. So at any rate, so a massive flood did occur, and it's really interesting to see, well, what exactly happened on the earth. Scientists go into that, but it doesn't matter for our purposes here. So, all right, what was Noah asked to do?
To the animals.
Okay. How many animals?
All the animals in the world, only 2 of each animal in the world.
Yeah, so a male and a female of each species, okay? And how do you save them?
Boat.
A big, fat boat, okay? And so you're going to have, all right, so Noah, there's a huge flood, in which case everything pretty much ends up dying, but they're going to be saved through a boat. And there's a I don't know if it's true or not. It's interesting to look at the evidence. There's an area in modern day Turkey. Anybody know where Turkey is? Kind of, you know where Turkey is?
Near Greece.
Near Greece, so to the east of Greece, okay? I'm bringing a group of people to Greece and Turkey in November, which is Turkey Month for Thanksgiving. Oh, come on. I'm a really good joke giver. So, at any rate, there's evidence of Noah's Ark on a mountain, Mount Arafat, in modern-day Turkey. I'm not going to say it's absolutely true. It's very interesting. It meets, so this, like, whatever's left of this thing, it meets the proportion. So we know how big Noah's Ark was, the Bible tells us. And there's this thing that obviously is well decomposed or whatever, all the wood from it. But it's of, it looks like a man-made object, and it's of the same proportions as given us in the Bible. It's an interesting thing, whatever. So saved through a boat and through water. So maybe something about baptism will be attached to that. All right. And so it's like a new creation. The flood is sort of like a new creation. Because, so why did God flood the world? That's an important question. Why do that? Because there was a lot of wickedness. We don't know what that was exactly, but at a certain point, God gets, not too happy with wickedness. I'm just noticing this is down here. And so eventually he'll send a natural disaster. But he promised that it would never happen again. All right, ladies, please. Now, at the end of the flood, when the waters receded, Noah saw, anybody know what he saw? He saw a rainbow, okay? Which was a sign of the covenant that God was renewing with humanity through Noah and his family that was on the boat, okay? And so that's where the rainbow, that's the significance of that. So Noah ends up, through his kids, okay, they kind of keep going on. They kind of reestablish civilization. The Tower of Babel. Anybody know anything about Tower of Babel? So humanity is growing, having a lot of kids, and they're building a city, and they learned how to make bricks, and they learned how to make buildings really tall, and they got really proud, and they're basically like, we can make buildings so tall we can reach the heavens. So it's really an act of pride. And so God humbles humanity by scattering them and changing their languages so that they wouldn't understand each other. Okay? So at any rate, so that's a little bit about Babel. I think language learning software, one of them is Babel. Yeah, so that's where they're getting that from. All right. Now, you fast forward a little bit, and this is around 2000 or a little over 2000, 2200 BC. Okay, now we're getting into closer historical things, and more evidence, archaeological evidence is going to build up. And we get to a very, very important, so we've transitioned from the early world to what's called the patriarchs. Okay, so these are just the male leaders of the tribes, the family of God, essentially. And so you have the next big figure to come is Abraham. Anybody know anything about Abraham? Abraham got shot in the head. You're thinking of, that's not wrong, but it's utterly useless for what we're considering right here. Which one got shot in the head? Abraham what? Lincoln, yeah. He got shot in the head. But we're not talking about Abraham Lincoln. We're talking about the other Abraham. The reason why he's called Abraham is this Abraham. Okay? And so Abraham is from modern day Iraq. Okay? And God begins calling to him saying, hey buddy, I've got plans for you several hundred miles to the west. Okay? In modern day Israel. And so, at any rate, God calls to Abraham. He responds. Okay? And then God makes a covenant. So we're getting a third covenant with Abraham. Now, this is where things get interesting. So, the sign of this covenant is not a rainbow. The sign of this covenant is circumcision. Okay? And you can talk to your parents about circumcision. Okay? Not getting into a detailed discussion about that now. You may be able to say, that's sort of a strange sign of a covenant. Well, it is what it is. And we're okay with that. So that's why circumcision is a thing. And Jews to this day, it's very important to them. It's no longer a necessity after Christ, but whatever. But God creates a covenant with Abraham. That's the sign of the covenant. And what's he going to promise? He's going to make some promises to Abraham. Number one, certain land. So over here we have just a glimpse. All right, ladies, put this in. You put that on vibrate or something, will you? So where is the Holy Land? Where's Israel? Somebody? Thank you. That's the best answer I've heard ever in my life. Now, if this is going to be really, really, my artistic skills are fantastic, and you're welcome. I'm going to treat you. So, here is Europe. Here is Africa. Here is Asia. Over here. Well, this is awful. All right, here's Asia. this is the Mediterranean Sea right here. You have Italy, okay? And then over here, this is where Israel is. Okay, between Europe, Africa, and Asia. It's sort of like in the middle of the world. The middle of the old world. Of course, we're way over here. So Abraham was from east of there, but God said, "Hey, I'm going to give you this land over here." So, what wars are taking place right now? There are two major wars taking place.
Ukraine and Russia.
Okay, Ukraine and Russia, they're fighting. Okay, they're in Asia. And the other war? I mean, is it a full-blown war? It's really nasty. It might as well be called a war, huh?
I think
So Israel and Gaza, or Israel and some of the neighbors there. So the land that we were just looking at, to this day, they're fighting over. To this day. Why is that land important and has been in the middle of so much history? It's because, girls, I love it. It's because God promised to give Abraham that land, so they've been fighting over it ever since. Okay? So God promised Abraham land, and also a kingdom, and eventually a worldwide blessing, that everybody's going to be blessed through Abraham. Abraham is a really big deal. Okay? So, Abraham receives this covenant. There's the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Does anybody know about Sodom and Gomorrah? These were two cities that were full of sin, and they had sin against nature, okay? AKA men with men and women with women. And at any rate, they are destroyed. That God rains down fire from heaven, destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham's all part of this. He saves his nephew who was living there, whatever. But a really big thing is the sacrifice of his son. So Abraham was a really old man. He didn't have any kids. And God said, "Hey, I'm going to bless you through your kids." And he's like, "I'm 90-something years old. I ain't got no kids." And God's like, "Don't worry about it." Actually, I think he was 85 at that time. But so God finally made his wife Sarah fertile. And so she conceived and had a son, Isaac. And so when Isaac was around y'all's age, probably 13, Abraham is told by God, "I want you to sacrifice your son. I want you to kill your son." Now God told Abraham, "I'm going to bless the entire world through your kids. Here you are, 99 years old. You have a 13-year-old son. I'm telling you to sacrifice him, to kill him." What an act of faith that has to be. He's trusting God that God's going to bless the world through his kids. He's got one kid, and God's saying, "I want you to sacrifice this." Notice how, this can play into our lives as well really quickly. If God asks us to sacrifice something that we love, do we trust that he's going to make it okay? Do we trust that we'll be happy even though we really like the thing? I'm not saying about killing somebody, sacrifice something, but at any rate, hey, 5 years ago, I didn't want to come out here. When I got the phone call to come out here, and because I was doing other work somewhere else, and I really loved that work, and I was being asked to sacrifice that work, and I actually had a moment where I'm like, okay, maybe I will, listen to you, God, and so I said yes to that, and now I'm really, really happy that I said yes to that sacrifice. Okay, and I'm sure you guys, if you haven't experienced it yet, you will. Okay, so the idea of sacrifice, very, very important. But now, what ends up happening? Does he end up killing his son?
No.
What happened? Well, what happened?
He doesn't kill him.
He doesn't. No. So his son is 13, and he's carrying wood for a sacrifice. So they're going to kill something. He tells his son, "Hey, we're going up this mountain. We're going to make sacrifice to God." So his son Isaac's like, all right, well, I guess, we're going to find something there and we're going to sacrifice it and we're going to burn it. And so Isaac is carrying wood for the sacrifice. Who else is a son who carried wood for his own sacrifice? Jesus. He carries his cross made of wood. Jesus, who's the Son of God. And he carries it to a mountain where he's going to be sacrificed. So you see, again and again, Jesus is going to fulfill so many of these things. Okay? But unlike Isaac, who was spared, at the very last second, an angel steadied Abraham's hand with the knife and said, "Do not kill your son." So you imagine he's that close, and he's told, "Don't." But it showed that he was willing to do it. He was willing to sacrifice. But when it comes to Jesus, God the Father didn't save his son. He let his son be sacrificed for us. So, at any rate, that's a very, very important part. So Abraham willing to sacrifice his son, and as a result, God blesses him. All right, and then we're going to probably get to here and then call it quits. Isaac has a son named Jacob. So if you ever wonder where these names come from, we're starting to touch on where you hear these names. So Jacob. Now Jacob is going to be renamed Israel. All right? He who wrestles with God. I think that's the meaning of the name. So when you hear the name Israel, it's really Jacob. Jacob is renamed to Israel. And this is why the country is named Israel. It's because of this guy right here. Okay? Now, Israel had 12 sons. Okay? With 4 different women. We don't need to get into all of that. Okay? But the point is he had 12 sons. And these are the sons right here. So you're going to hear a lot about the 12 tribes of Israel. So each of these sons, they're going to be the head of a tribe. So a whole group of people are going to come forth from them. And so the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 is an important number. How many apostles are there? 12. Jesus chooses 12 apostles because he's choosing 12 new tribes of Israel. Okay? And so, at any rate, Jacob lives his best life. And so, at a certain point, you see this name down here, Joseph. Joseph's one of the youngest. And his dad seems to like him the most out of all of them. And guess what? If dad likes him the most, how do you feel? How do you think the others felt? Jealous. So what they do?
No,
Close. They wanted to. Some of them wanted to.
They sold him to someone.
But they sold him to someone who was going to Egypt. So they sold him to slave traders who happened to be going by. And so Joseph gets sold into Egypt. And so we're going to begin the transition here. But so he's in Egypt as a slave. And then just through a series of stories, he goes from being a slave to being this, who?
Number 2 in like the kingdom.
Yeah, the right-hand man of the king. So what do you call the king in Egypt? Pharaoh. So he goes from being a slave to the right-hand man of the king. So number 2. So he has the authority of the king. He's able to rule in the name of the king. Because the king is busy, eating grapes and talking to beautiful women and having feasts and stuff like that. And so the day-to-day, how do you run this kingdom? Joseph is going to do, okay? And he also has a number of dreams. Joseph has a number of dreams. And so there's going to be another Joseph who's going to sound a lot like this Joseph. And who is that? His letter's up there.
The father of Egypt.
very close to the foster father of Jesus. He's not his biological father. So the foster father of Jesus, St. Joseph, he had dreams. He brought Jesus as an infant and Mary down to Egypt, just like this Joseph brought his family down to Egypt. And then he ruled over the house of God, the Holy Family. And so there's a lot of parallels between St. Joseph and this Joseph right here. Okay? And then, so Joseph brings all of his family down to Egypt. Why? Now, why did they go down to Egypt? Because there was a famine. What's a famine? A famine's when there's no food. Okay? And so Joseph, long story short, he knew a famine was going to be coming in a few years, so he stocked up a bunch of food in Egypt. And so when that famine did come, when there was no food, Egypt was the only place with extra food. And so everybody was going to Egypt in order to be fed it was like 7 long years of very little food. And so Joseph's family comes to Egypt to buy food. And he's like, surprise, brothers who sold me off to slave. Can you imagine that? Your brothers sell you to slave traders, and you're a slave in Egypt. And then you rise up to number 2, and then your brothers are in town buying food. What would you say to your brothers who sold you into slavery? Huh, Meme, if Felipe sold you? What would you say to Felipe if he sold you into slavery and you met him years later? You'd probably punch him. You'd want to at least, but this Joseph didn't. All right, he took care of his brothers, took care of his family. And so his family settled in Egypt, and then they did very, very well. And then eventually the Pharaoh dies, Joseph dies, and then there's a new Pharaoh who doesn't like all of these Hebrews, and he turns them into slaves. And then the Jews turn into slaves for hundreds of years. And then that sets the story for Moses, and we're not going to get into that this evening. All right? Any questions on that? All right. Thank you, ladies. Any questions in general? Nothing, is it? Okay, fine. Nothing's worried about. All right, good. Then we're all done here. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Through the intercession of Blessed Mary, ever Virgin, and all the angels and saints, may the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit descend upon you and remain with you forever. Amen.